Good evening, boys and girls. It's that time once again for everybody's favorite podcast about writers, actors, directors, and all of those spots in between that goes into a film production. I am Josh, joined as always by the lovely and talented Brandon.
Hello.
And we have a particularly interesting show for you tonight. At least, in my opinion, it's particularly interesting. And I don't think I'm just blowing smoke either. Because we're going to talk about something that, you know what, more people should maybe talk about. And you know what? I probably won't do it in any justice. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what we're going to talk about tonight, Brandon?
Okay, so you and I have had a conversation over the last, we've had a conversation over the last couple of years about this off and on, about how a lot of movies that were made years ago, and while we try to usually stick within the parameters of, the independent sector of the film industry, that's not going to be the case tonight. Because it will be, but we're also going to dive into mainstream filmmaking as well. But we've discussed the whole thing over the years with being politically correct in scripts, and in the recent years with this quote-unquote woke culture, in which I feel is really like a very insincere thing that mainstream Hollywood tries to push on people to line their pockets. And that's my view. People may not agree with it, but that is my very personal view. Let's face it, woke culture, it's been subject to parodies and criticism by some who have described the term as synonymous with race baiting, extreme forms of political correctness, and, pretty much internet call-out culture, censorship, or even virtue signaling in films. And I partially agree with that. There's some things I don't. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into writing scripts these days, and it mainly is within the parameters of writing comedy. I believe it was actually Todd Phillips who said that woke culture made him stop writing comedy, which I think was really just his way of saying that he can't be funny without, I don't know, like being sexist, or without being, without, some kind of really crude, off-the-wall humor. That may be a stretch because, a lot of his things aren't really inherently sexist by any means. But that was the flack that he got from a lot of people. So that's what our conversation is going to be tonight. Really just about evolving with writing and just not censoring yourself, or not like handcuffing yourself to what you want to write. Just be more mindful of it should you want to be successful in writing. Or even if you make your own film, being successful in, getting a fan base for it and actually having it go somewhere and being used as a calling card for, future projects. But that's what I've got. So, Josh, would you like to kick off the night?
Well, we begin, as we do every week, by letting you know where you can find us outside of this fine broadcast that we do every Friday night here at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and 4 p.m. Hawaiian. That comes into play in just a second. But you can follow me on Twitter at SkitComic. You can follow the brand of the podcasts I make at Simicore Studios on Twitter. And if you are in the mood to follow things or give things a like, go to Facebook, search up Simicore Studios, give it a like, and I'll be able to update you on everything that's going on in Simicore Studios, not just there, not just on Twitter, but you know what? Here's my phone number. No, I probably shouldn't do that.
I dare
Brandon, you. Where can people reach out to you on the internet?
Well, we are on Facebook. You can go to facebook.com/the Wadcast. I'll take you right to our page. But you can also reach me over on Instagram at instagram.com/the Wadcast. It's not very original, but it gets the point across. It's our page. I post updates quite often. But then we have our website, thewadcast.com, where for those of you listening right now, if you have to leave shortly or if you're not able to catch a full episode, I usually always upload the episodes at the end of, at the end of the night when they're available. I put them on the websites. Last weekend was a little bit of a fluke just for the fact that I had some technical difficulties and didn't get around to it until I think Sunday. So, yeah, that's where I can be reached. And if you want to reach me personally, I live in Southern California. I'll let you guess where. But
so if you need to borrow some gas money, find Brandon.
Have you seen the gas prices out here, man? No one's borrowing gas money from me at all. It's pretty much they can just go down and siphon gas out of cars on the street. There's plenty of them.
Well, if you like the sound of my voice, I do a couple of more podcasts right here at Semicore Studios. One of them is about pro wrestling. We do it every Saturday night at 10 o'clock. It's called the Backstage Slam. My partners, there's 4 of us now. We multiplied. We got one in upstate New York, one in Utah, and one all the way in Hawaii. Hence, why I always throw in that Hawaiian time. So, Ben, if you're out there listening, hey, buddy.
I got you. Okay. That's where the Hawaii thing came from. Threw me off there.
Yes, it is.
But, but yeah, so I fear like tonight, you and I discussed earlier the idea of coming up with like a list of movies that we feel that when they were written, they were hysterical. They were actually really funny. And they, looking back, they are still funny, but you can kind of like see the moments in these films where like, oh, yeah, this would never work.
Now, I had to change the criteria up in my mind a little bit because when it came to what wouldn't get made using that verbiage, I kept finding simple solutions to movies that maybe had a scene or a couple of lines of dialogue that would not work at all in today's society. So I, in my mind, made it what wouldn't get released as is.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And that's when the floodgates really opened up. It was like,
I mean, there's a lot.
That definitely wouldn't fly. That wouldn't fly. And what surprised me, thinking back on some of these are beloved films that I have to say, yeah, there are some cringy moments in it that would not fly. I go back and I see movies that really, back then, it wasn't even pushing the envelope. It was just society. It was just the way it was. But
oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Today, it's like, whoa, where did that edge come from? I don't remember watching that as a kid.
Oh yeah, I mean there was something I was looking at earlier. I was actually watching it the other night. Was Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy.
Classic.
And the scene where, and the scene where Dan Aykroyd shows up to the get together, completely just blackface and everything else, dressed up as a Jamaican man, even doing the accent, like not even fooling anybody at the party. The scene's hysterical. But you look at this and it's like, ugh. Yeah. This
that's a thing they did.
Like it's one of those things where it's funny, and I get why it's offensive. But so I mean, this is like that and 16 Candles with I think there was an Asian student. It's been years since I've seen it, but there was an Asian student that whenever this character would enter a room, there'd be a gong sound.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time. And I'm looking at this like, oh. Well, this wasn't really a comedy movie. Like, I mean, it was funny, but it was like one of the it was more of a serious film than anything else. Like, it was funny, but it didn't really come off as like the kind of comedy that would mix with like not another teen movie, I guess. It was one of those, for John Hughes, it just kind of didn't. It was a different kind of comedy, I guess, is the best way to put it. But so what movies were you talking about that would never get made today?
Well, the first one that came to my mind instantly was one that I actually watched in a film studies class, and that is The Searchers with John Wayne.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually a
Now,
good movie,
yeah,
but
it's a good movie,
not
but
really.
watching it, uh, seeing the really, really, really rampant racism being played out on the big screen. And I understand
Oh yeah.
that, that's part of the story. But the hero is not a good person. Not no,
No,
not
no.
no, he's not a good person at all. And because of the way he feels about the native people and talks about them, makes me believe that if somebody tried to get that distributed today, they would be told, not put it on YouTube or something, because I'm not going to sell it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And see, I like how you did that. Like you just looked up movies themselves, whereas I looked at movies and picked out certain scenes in these films. Like so, I guess like with you, you'd be covering like the distribution aspect, and I'd be covering the things that would just probably not fly based on how they're written. So
Stop production altogether.
pretty much. Well, I mean, like look at, and I've had this conversation with you earlier. Um,
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds, man. I mean, it's like the movie's
Yeah.
great.
That's on
It's
my
such a
list.
great. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite comedies from the '80s. But uh, the scene where the lead character wants to get back at his rival because he has a crush on, and while he also has a crush on his rival's girlfriend, dresses up in a costume and tricks this
Yeah.
woman into thinking that he is her friend, has sex with her, and
Mm-hmm.
and even at the end of the movie, she finds out. She's like, "Oh, okay." Like, okay. So I mean, it's like, and I guess that's another thing. A lot of those 80s, a lot of those older movies, you write these female characters as being just kind of, I guess, just tits and ass and everything else to look at. When instead of actually, at least in the comedy films, I should say, when in all actually, like as opposed to actually painting them as fully capable women. Now, don't get me wrong, I still laugh at these films. I still think that they're absolutely fucking hysterical. But looking at that scene, and I think that's my one F word for the night. Looking at these scenes, these are things where if I were to write that today and try to get it pitched and be like, oh, there's this great scene where the protagonist dresses up as his antagonist and tricks the antagonist's girlfriend into having sex with him, and it's a huge comedy plot point. I would have my ass booted out of that room in 2 seconds flat. Like just no ifs, ands, or buts.
Or you might have a six-picture deal from a certain producer if this was done 20 years ago.
I'm talking
What?
today, though.
Did I say? I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was talking out loud there.
So what do you got?
You know, it seems teen comedies, college comedies, things like that, they always have not necessarily been a part of PC culture. So,
Oh, come on,
my
American Pie was totally PC.
and that was part of the. You know what? We can get to that in a second. But the one
Yep,
what I
okay.
want to talk about is Animal House.
Mhm.
There's a specific scene in that movie where a character is about to sleep with a girl, and he, they're doing the little frisky thing, and he reaches, into her clothes and pulls out wads of toilet paper, showing she's stuffing her bra, and yeah, she falls over, passes out. The thing is, I guess it's you know, she snuck into the college party because she's not college age. She's a minor.
Yeah.
And as soon as she passes out, the little devil pops up on her shoulder, and he's like, do it. And the angel's like, don't do it. And he gets this sly grin, and then they show him kind of leaning off camera towards her, like, yep, he's doing it. So, Animal House, because date rape's a joke.
There was a what was the movie I was thinking? No, like that's that's exactly it. Like things like that. These are things that you can't write today. What was the here, I've got it right here, bear with me. Let me see. There was a movie made back in the I think it was I want to say the 70s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. No, it was 70s. Pretty Baby with Brooke Shields. She was 11 years old in this movie. She played a child prostitute. I saw this movie in college at the behest of somebody that, I was friends with in my film school. So I go over to his apartment, and we're sitting down, like we're having a watch party, before this is before Facebook. This is like back in the MySpace days. So we didn't have like online watch parties. We had actually go out and hang out with your friends watch parties. He puts on Pretty Baby, and I'll tell you right now, 15, 20 minutes into this film, every single person in this room just slowly turns their heads and stares at this guy who was just glued to the screen. Because we were that shocked, because I'd never heard of this movie before. This is an 11-year-old Brooke Shields playing a child prostitute, complete with nude scenes. I didn't even stay for the whole film. And it took me a second to even look it up earlier, because I was really... I was so hesitant to even go to Google and type in Brooke Shields' first film, because I don't want to come off as, someone that should be on a list. So... But this is a movie that, they could probably make it, today, not with a 10 or 11-year-old girl being nude and seducing a guy. And honestly, I don't know if there's any scenes of, what should be happy adult fun time, but with an 11-year-old. I hope there's not. I haven't, just honestly, like I haven't seen it since. I haven't had any desire to see it since. But it's a great example of something that just would never, ever, ever fly today. And this is where things come in, that where I say, like, PC culture, there's a difference between being politically correct and just evolving with the times and what's, I guess, considered art or acceptable. I would even dare to say that if it was based on a true story or something like that were based on a true story, still, you may not want to do it. I guess write and film at your own risk. But yeah, it's one of those films where I was just completely, I had to leave. So, but to lighten the mood on that one, I will definitely say something like, I think I read somewhere someone was bashing what was it? Shallow Hal.
Okay.
I think that fell into more of the one of those woke culture Facebook pages or Facebook posts. Something that was just recently discovered, because Shallow Hal, I think, is like 97 or 98 or so. It's somewhere around there. Because I mean, it's like a Jack Black then versus now. It was not exactly a new movie, but right. Someone was slamming this film, talking about 2000. Oh, it was. Oh, okay. It's not. I thought it was a little older than that. Okay. Well, someone was slamming this film, talking about how it makes fun of fat and ugly people. And I'm looking at this thinking, it really doesn't. at all. Like, I mean, it does to an extent, but not in the way that this person was talking about. It was
It
actually
doesn't
raising
in the
awareness.
context of the film.
Exactly. It does it because if he's called Shallow Hal for a reason. He's extremely shallow. And what was it? Jason Alexander playing his best friend has this gorgeous woman that is really into him. And he is absolutely grossed out because her toe is a little longer than her big toe. Is just like a little, just kind of peeks over her big toe, and he is so disgusted by that. But the whole movie just has to do with like just seeing what's on the inside of a person. It comes with a good message, and people I think seem to get lost in the story as opposed to actually paying attention to what the story is trying to convey.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But I mean, I
that,
have a long list. I'm just trying to pick out the ones that stand out the most to me in regards to what I've recently come across online. So
the like you said, the thing to remember about Shallow Hal especially is the fact that, yeah, overweight people are made fun of, and as somebody in that culture, I guess I'm a big dude. It made sense to, I don't know, show the character shallowness and begin his story arc of redemption. You can't fix a character if he's never broken.
no, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a boring. It's going to be a boring story if your protagonist is absolutely perfect. I think
that's why Superman never worked on screen.
Excuse me, Man of Steel. Man of Steel was actually phenomenal. Okay,
get off this show.
You didn't like Man of Steel?
No, it was not a good movie.
Oh my god. Okay, we'll get into that. We'll get into that after the show because that's not what the show's about.
Let the tornado kill me, son.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not going to say it was free of its. I'm not going to say that it's free of its weak moments. That was something I didn't really get, especially considering the fact that the entire town already knew that there was something up with Clark.
Paul Kent was a total dick.
Oh, I know. Should I have let them die? I don't know. Maybe I get it. But either way, coming away from Man of Steel.
Yeah, back to the.
God. No, you and I are going to have it out after the show. I promise.
Airplane. Airplane's a movie they wouldn't release today because it plays into racial stereotypes. Like,
oh god,
I speak jive.
Well, no, I think that something like Airplane, if it's made right, it could still be done. Now, and see, the thing is if they were to remake Airplane, which I hope they don't, I'm so sick of remakes. But if they were to go back and remake, Airplane, if they were to have the proper minds behind it, I think it could be hysterical, and I think it actually could still hold up to something that the original was doing. Now, you can never replace, Leslie Nielsen ever. I mean, that man was a national treasure. But but at the same time, you have very talented comedic, writers and directors. The Wayans brothers. I would fully trust the Wayans brothers to go back and do something with, Airplane. I would trust them with that, considering what they did with Scary Movie, Scary Movie 2, Haunted House, like all that stuff that they do, White Chicks. I mean, those guys are able to go out and make fun of these cultures and just these kind of situations. They could actually probably do a good job. Mel Brooks would actually probably be awesome at that, but he's actually on my list too for some of the things that he wrote.
I did not say who could make a better version of it. I didn't say what could be fixed. I said as is, as it was made, would it be released? Would it be distributed? And I don't think
fair enough. Okay.
Airplane would be released. As is Pedophile Copilot. Yeah.
Don't call me Shirley.
That's God. Anti-something, okay. I'm sure.
Well, see, like one thing that came up on my list I was looking at, and mind you, I am a huge Mel Brooks fan. I love Mel Brooks. Blazing Saddles. No way in hell.
First of all, it's good to be the king. Continue.
No, I'm just saying. But Blazing Saddles, the entire scene, the whole scene when just like the whole movie basically, where the entire town hates them. The N word is used so many times, and I get it. It takes place in the Wild West, and that was a very common word used to describe a black person back then. Um, and in some parts of the U.S., I guess it still kind of is because some people don't like to evolve with know progress. But the scene where he's being held up at gunpoint after he strolls into town and announces himself as the new sheriff, and then, just like that. And I think there's a scene where this old lady comes by after they accept him as a sheriff. She comes by and she drops off a pie for him. He says, "Thank you so much," and she says, "No worries." Um, and then she says goodbye, and then uses the N word. Like, I mean, it's after this sweet conversation, and it adds to the comedy. But it's one of those films that just, even with Mel Brooks with his brilliance, these are products of a time period that cannot be replicated with modern day filmmaking or screenwriting. It's just not going to happen. You may have a small select audience, but chances are something like along the lines of Blazing Saddles, your audience, if it's written by a white or Jewish man, it is going to be a bunch of people that have Confederate flags outside of the trailers. But you know I'm right. And that's not to say for other Mel Brooks films. That one though, no, no, it did. No, absolutely. It is far from racist. I mean, the whole film was showing how much good a black sheriff that was not accepted into a town did for the town. Like, I mean, he's the hero. He and Gene Wilder were the heroes of that movie.
Yes.
But the thing is like, you look at that. It's not like it's, what was that movie I told you about a month or two ago? I think what was it called? LaShonda. Um, LaShonda or LaQuisha or some, I forget what it was. I think it was LaQuisha, about a an independent film that was made, um, written and directed and starring the a very just like a middle-aged white guy who's down and out and decides he's going to become a radio show host. And he enters into an audition where they only want members of the community, so he disguises his voice to be a black woman named LaQuisha. And then in the movie, in this movie, I honestly, it only got made because he made it himself. But in this movie, he ends up getting tired of lying to his fan base. He gets up and he quits because he hires a black woman to be the face of the character that he created, to pass her off as this LaQuisha. They get into it. He walks out. She takes over the show, and then she ends up bombing the show. And then she begs him to come back, saying that he was a better black woman than she could ever be. I'm looking at this thinking, oh, what have you done since this? Oh, not much. Like, it's just like even for me, like you, Josh, you know me. Anyone that knows me knows that I am the furthest from politically correct on any level. I make myself laugh at the most inappropriate things. This, watching this movie, was uncomfortable for me to watch. I think I might actually go back and watch that, like, whatever uh, Brooke Shields movie was before I watch this movie again. It was bad. But it got made, but then it got panned, and he got labeled pretty much a racist, and even with the people in the film saying he's not, the actors saying that he's not, it's kind of hard for someone to shake that after they write something like that.
Okay. I forgot what I was going to say next.
I'll
Do you
wait.
want me to, do you know, I'm just going to go ahead and give you my next movie, and you let me know what you think, okay?
Okay, go for it.
And it really pains me to have to say this, because it is really one of the all-time favorite movies from my childhood. In fact, I just showed it to my kids recently, and like I mentioned before, watching it today, I hadn't seen it in a while, watching it today left me a cringy feeling during certain aspects of it, and it's Short Circuit.
Yeah, you talking about the lead actor? I do. The one with the lead actor
Steve
playing an
Guttenberg.
Indian guy when he was British. Yeah, him.
Oh, Fisher Stevens is not British.
Oh, I'm sorry, American, but still, I mean, it's just like he's just a white guy.
Yeah, blonde hair.
He played one of the. He played one of the dinosaur brother twin goons from Super Mario Brothers, the movie.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's not like this was the 40s or the 50s or even the 60s, where it's like, okay, maybe there weren't a whole lot of people being hired of color in the industry. This was 1980s. I'm pretty sure they could have found one Indian actor to play the Indian scientist. But instead,
you would think
they went with the guy from Chicago to play the white guy from Chicago to play the scientist from India in complete brown face.
complete brown face with the accent.
In the
Dyed his hair black and everything.
If somebody tried, if they screened this movie for distributors, I guarantee you, after the first 10 minutes, everybody's walked out. They're like,
probably.
No, this does not work. This will not fly. And it's really a shame, because I can't say he's not funny in the role. It's just not right.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I get actually. Danielle and I actually got into a conversation about that not too long ago. We were talking about that movie, and we both love Short Circuit. I mean, it's a classic. It really is. It's a fantastic movie. But again, that movie, and even to say it's a product of its time, the '80s was. I have to say it was, because the '80s was not exactly a very sensitive time. Today is.
The '80s should have known better.
Yeah, but I mean, again, going back to what I was saying with Trading Places, things like people, like, white actors wearing, like, makeup or something like that in the movie to portray, like, a different race, even if it's just as a joke in the film, it happened a few times. But there was a movie that came out in the early 2000s.
Can I get you to hold on real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
Because I do have to follow up on this.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, dude. Go ahead. My bad.
The idea, though, about Fisher Stevens portraying this character, I guess it wasn't off the table enough. It wasn't offensive enough. However you want to put it, because you do remember what the follow-up was, right?
It was just him the entire film and Johnny Five. That was it.
They gave him a movie. They made him the lead in Short Circuit 2. So it was him and Johnny Five. That was...
Oh, God.
They were like, we need more of this. That's their takeaway from Short Circuit. You know what? We don't need Steve Guttenberg, because people might be getting tired of Steve Guttenberg. We don't need Ali Sheedy. That's who it was, right?
Yeah, Ali Sheedy.
We don't need Ali Sheedy because, it's almost the 90s. We're getting past that kind of phase in Hollywood. You know what we do need? We need more Fisher Stevens and Brownface. That's what we need.
Oh, God.
So
the 80s.
yeah,
Well, it's like, well, it's like, I mean, with things like other things like talking about like evolving with how you write things, and you see how things have evolved. But even in the last, when did The Hangover come out? In 2009, I believe. The scene where Stu is talking to his not yet fiance but very domineering girlfriend about how they're going to a vineyard, and everyone else in the group pulls up in the car outside, and Bradley Cooper shouts, "Paging Dr. Faggots." And I remember seeing this in theaters, and I was laughing hysterically, and I didn't see it for like another year or so. But I watched it, oh God, last year sometime. And I'm looking at this like, oh, that joke didn't age well. Like, I mean, like, however you joke with your friends or whatever else, behind closed doors, whatever, I don't care. But, and even then, like, like how me and my friends would joke with each other growing up, that came out a few times with us, like, growing up. And then as you get older, it's like, I really just don't really care for that word. But there was a movie that came out in the early 2000s that there's no way in hell it would get even past, any kind of person that's willing to finance a film. Sorority Boys. For those of you that have never heard of this movie, it is Michael Rosenbaum. I forget the names of the other two actors off the top of my head. But it's the guy that played the stoner that got locked up in prison in Half-Baked. And then the other guy was the older brother from Seventh Heaven. But
Williams.
Yes. But the movie's about three fraternity brothers who are hated by the president. So he frames them. They get kicked out. They pretty much get banished from the fraternity house. So they end up going across the street. They get an idea. There's a sorority across the street from them called the DOGs, and it's all a bunch of really, I guess they're supposed to be like ugly or just very unappealing college girls in the doghouse. It's so bad. The fraternity would launch sex toys from a slingshot through their windows to mess with them and harass them. So these three fraternity brothers get an idea of cross-dressing and going into the sorority house and pledging as, sisters for them. And I'm looking at like the movie. First off, it is hysterical. It's so dumb. I mean, there's a God. There's the two lead characters get into a huge fight with each other, and they have a full-on dildo fight, like just straight up sword fight style with these things. The movie's hysterical. It's raunchy as hell, but it's something that would never get made today. And it's, even if you were to write this and put it into like a screenplay competition, I don't think you'd rank too highly with it. If you were to if things were to stay the same as they were in this, And there's ways that you could go about this and have it be funny, but it's just as is, it would never work. Um, but all this begs a question: PC culture. Do you think that it is something that you should work towards? I'm asking you this, Josh. Do you think it's something that you
Okay.
should, mindfully work towards and conform to, or do you think that you should remain, I guess, uninhibited in your writing and hope for the best in your success?
So you're asking me as a writer whether or not I consider PC culture when I write?
Yes.
Hmm. You know, that's a good question. I mean, personally, I don't believe that I write anything that would touch on any of these things. Um, and if I did approach, okay, I'll tell you what, I am actually working on something, and this might ruffle a few feathers. And I know I don't, and we don't normally talk about active projects, but I think it's very apt.
I'll just minimize the description of it, that's all.
Okay, as minimal as possible. I want to. I'm writing something that will explain to white people what white privilege is.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. It's ambitious.
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge, but that's one of the reasons that I wanted to write it, because one, it feels like it's something that needs to be done. I know a lot of filmmakers out there have put out things that have shown it, that have blatantly stated it is what it is, but I don't think it's ever been done from the perspective of someone that doesn't get it. I don't think it's ever been done from a perspective of a character that just has no idea what it is. So that's the idea.
Yeah, that could be something that's
your description, then I guess so. That I don't keep those kinds of things in mind. In fact, I'm not afraid to push the envelope. As you not going to mention any names or plots or anything, but I did send you something. I believe it was yesterday.
Yes.
And I believe your response was, "You're messed up."
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's because I already thought it was messed up enough because I wrote the first draft and sent it over to you to touch up a little bit. So between the two of us, we're both equally messed up people. But
yeah, I dipped it in sin. Covered it in sin.
To say sin is a little different. I think probably God, Jesus, and Satan all cried if they read that. They'd just be in tears, not on the happy kind.
Who is this person?
So, but yeah, see, it's and that's.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but if this one actually gets produced, we'll tell everybody upon release that this is what we were talking about. Until then,
that's fine.
You're going to have to wait.
See, but with the whole PC thing, that's something that I honestly, I don't even pay attention to it. Not when I'm writing anyway. When I'm done writing, I'll go back and I'll reread it and I'll see, okay, can I keep this in here? How would this play out? Is it something that can add to the story, or is it something that should not even be attempted in the story? Did I just write an entire script and it's too offensive? None of these things come to my mind until after I've already written something. The script I sent you was something that I was working a night shift, and I was like, oh, you know what? I've got a little time. My patients are happy, and they're all out cold, and I have absolutely nothing to do for the next 2.5 hours unless a call light goes on. So I'm like, okay, well, I will go ahead and I'll focus on writing something. So that's where that came from. And really, it was also a little frustration with Manette, which is kind of like why I think when I wrote it, it was just angry.
Hmm. I get that.
it,
And I saw that.
it, yeah, it wasn't that great of a. I don't know. I think the concept was there, but the actual some of the comedy was there, but it was so incredibly subtle that it was almost non-existent. Um, but yeah, so like my writing, I don't pay attention to anything like that. I mean, I think Hurricane Party, one of my scripts, there was a scene where a guy that has no experience with kids gets stuck hanging out with a little kid for a little bit, and this kid's like 5 years old. And this guy is doing shots of Jameson, and the kid goes to reach for the Jameson. All this character that can think of is like, no, you shouldn't drink. You shouldn't drink liquor. Let me get you some apple juice in that shot glass, and you can do shots of apple juice with me. And it's not PC by any means. And I don't like honestly. The scene had me laughing too much. So I refuse to take it out because it's just something that made me laugh. And then I think the mom comes. I think the mom comes back to pick up her kid from this this party that she asked that she has them at because these are her next door neighbors. They know each other. She trusts them, so it's not like it's a raging house party. It's just a bunch of adults hanging out. But she comes back to get the kid, and the character comes over to say, "Oh yeah, he's been great. He's over there. He's a little dizzy right now. I don't know what's wrong with him. Does he have a medical condition?" You find out that the kid's doing shit like the last glass that he poured for the kid was apple juice, and he poured a Jameson for himself, but he accidentally picks up the apple juice and leaves the Jameson on the table, so the kid, drinks the Jameson, like does a shot of Jameson. So not politically correct at all.
No.
And there's even a scene after that, they're like, oh, he's drinking whiskey. No, he's drinking apple juice. This is whiskey, okay? Watch. And he does a shot of he does a shot. It's like, why the hell does this taste like apple juice? Like, it's just so mindless about what just happened. But yeah, so like that's an example, and it wasn't until after I went back and reread the script, I'm like, okay, I can't say this and I can't say this. I don't know if I can get away with this. But the child doing a shot of Jameson, since it explains this character's mindlessness and self-absorption that he has in the script, I'm going to keep it in there, and just see how it plays out. But yeah, so it's like there's a lot of stuff going on, and then with things such as I think our next topic was the whole because that's PC culture for you. Not bad. It's not horrible. It's not going to destroy careers unless you're really trying to go out there to offend people with your writing. But then there's the topic of woke culture, which has so many different, definitions or labels, however you want to put it. But there is trying to think of the best way to put it. There's a lot of movies that have come out recently in the last couple of years that I feel are really trying to cater to one kind of culture and show how this movie is so much better than what's been coming out. And in my idea, it's Hollywood just pretty much being like, well, whatever. Like, this is, people are getting a little sensitive and things are coming to light. It's not like it's a bad thing, but women are just as good, if not better, at a lot of things as men. Just like that, men are just as good and better at some things than women are. It's just, it's not a battle of sexes, but if you want to call it that these days, there is one going around, and it's pretty potent at times. But you have things like Ghostbusters in 26.
That there's just a battle of sexes. It's going around,
Well, no, and I get how trust me, I get how that sounds, and I get how it sounded when I said it. But it's not everywhere. But where it exists, it exists with some severe animosity and ferocity behind it.
Yeah,
But
I can't say
yeah,
you're wrong. There's, and I know the example you're about to get to, and I'll let you get to it in just a second.
yeah, go ahead.
And in some ways, though, especially in the example you're about to mention, sometimes you see something like that happen. You see it come out, you see people talking about it, and getting put into a position to defend it vigorously before, it even comes out. It's like they're fighting a battle that they're the only ones that know is being waged.
No, exactly.
So go
And
ahead, let them know what we're talking about.
see, what I'm about to talk about is, and I'll say this: Paul Feige has had some great movies, and he's had
For sure.
movies that he's had movies that have come out that I've absolutely loved. Bridesmaids was one of my favorite films. But when Paul Feige came out with, with Ghostbusters in 2016, I'm not going to be like one of those toxic asshole fans. I was actually very excited about it, even knowing it was a reboot. I was like, you know what? It's probably the closest thing I'll ever get to seeing a brand new Ghostbusters movie as an adult. So I'm going to go and enjoy this film. I remember seeing the trailer, and it said, I think the opening line was like 30 years ago, four scientists, even though it was only three scientists and one everyday man, but we won't get there. We won't get there, rather. But four scientists saved the city of, save the world from a supernatural presence, whatever the line was. So it starts off as if it's going to tie in to the original films. So there was confusion there because it was announced it was a reboot. But then with that, it kind of like just made it seem like it was a continuation of the story. And then the movie comes out. I didn't get a chance to go see it on opening weekend, but I was already turned off by it because there was already a smear campaign against it. But instead of handling it with any kind of, I guess, class, Paul Feige's first thing to go to was, women are funny, get over it. It's just like, well, no shit, women are funny. Look at Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, those two are hysterical.
Yes.
And even some of the actresses in that movie, like, I mean, Kate McKinnon, I think she is insanely talented. I love her. But he goes on this whole thing about how women are funny, get over it. And then the women started firing back about how if you don't like this movie, you're sexist. Like, well, maybe I just don't like the movie. Like, I mean, you're attacking a fan base that has kept this movie's legacy alive for 30 plus years, and that fan base is predominantly men. And you can't go in there and start saying that, like, well, I'm writing this because all men can do is gross out humor. It's like, well, Paul Feige, your last film, you had a woman shitting in the street and another woman shitting in a sink. They were talking about bleached assholes and everything else. I mean, it's not exactly like, it's actually, it is a good movie. I would always recommend Bridesmaids to anybody. It's actually a good film. But in this movie, it starts off with a joke of, I think it was either Kate McKinnon or Melissa McCarthy, queefing. And it was just like, you're going to start the movie off with that. And it just wasn't funny. It painted every man in the movie as either dumb, incompetent, or an asshole. And so after you've already attacked the fan base that pretty much has established this movie in the annals of, cinematic history as a pop culture classic, you're going to attack the very people that helped build it. Now, I get it. If you make this movie with like all women, there's nothing wrong with that at all. There's no issue with it whatsoever. I would have had no issue with it being all women. It just didn't work because it wasn't funny, at least to me. Of course, comedy is subjective. It wasn't funny to me.
We did both agree that Kate McKinnon was majestic.
No, she was the heart, soul, and embodiment of anything that could ever be Ghostbusters. I would have no issue with her ever being in a Ghostbusters. I wouldn't have an issue with any of those women being Ghostbusters in any film at all. What I rose issues with was how instantly people were attacked after that movie came out because of the movie's poor reception. Um, and that wasn't the only one that ever happened to. Birds of Prey didn't do too well in the box office. So in response to that, the woman that created Birds of Prey went on a rampage. And other people started going on the same rampage about how if you don't like this movie, you're sexist because you obviously don't like female-led films. Like, well, no. Charlie's Angels 1 and 2 were actually I actually did enjoy them.
Birds of
Which
Prey,
brings
I
me to
think,
New
was
Charlie.
just, it was marketed wrong.
No, it absolutely was. It was very, very, very poorly marketed. It was very very misguiding, and everything else. Because the actual, I guess, female villain team, whatever, they didn't get together till like the last 15 minutes of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very misleading that that they were actually all the trailers made it look like they were just kicking ass the entire time. And like I told you, the first 40 minutes of Harley Quinn just trying to eat a damn sandwich was driving me crazy. It was just like a nonstop joke. I was over it after 5 seconds. But
But I liked it.
you have these movies that are labeled as such that if you don't like them, you're sexist.
Uh-huh.
And you have an entire culture of people that jump on that get that rally behind it. Terminator Dark Fate, I didn't mind it at all. I thought it was good for what it was. It was a Terminator film. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. I mean, you can't really top Terminator 2 at all, and it hasn't happened yet.
No.
I honestly liked Terminator Salvation. Right after, my order is Terminator 1, 2, and Terminator Salvation. The rest of them just don't even exist to me. But the whole franchise with that, it got shifted once, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, John Connor is killed in the very beginning of the movie as a child. So this whole movie takes place and shifts the saviorhood to a lead that is a woman. And I believe she's like the lead of the resistance in the future, if I'm not mistaken. But that was met with so much animosity from numerous different people that if you didn't like this, then you were just intolerant. And it draws a divide in entertainment to where you have a lot of people that are worried about what they can and cannot write, or what they can and cannot, like even this group that you and I are in. Remember that one guy said something about how he's writing something, should he not write it because it might be offensive to somebody?
Yeah, the religious script.
Yeah. I mean, I think my reaction was, have you not seen Dogma?
I think the moral of this entire story, when it comes to worrying about being PC or being woke, is to remember to write what you want to write. Period. End of story.
Well, that's it. See, write what you want to write, but also be mindful that times have changed. Times are different. For newer screenwriters and whatnot, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. But for people such as you and myself, we're both 37 years old. We were raised around a time with Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back or American Pie. We watched raunchy comedies in the 90s because they were all over the place. It's not that culture anymore.
Raunchy stuff coming out today. In fact, some of it even more raunchy than you and I could have possibly imagined as kids growing up watching the R-rated movies of the 80s. But
no, absolutely.
The thing is, it was a different time. I know it's a cop-out answer, but it was a completely different time where you could get away with, certain jokes about certain topics like race and, some things I don't even want to mention because it feels weird to talk about for me. We'll just say you remember The Professional?
Oh yeah, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, in other countries, they do play up a romance angle between him
Oh.
and the girl.
Yeah, 12-year-old Natalie Portman.
Yeah, and it was cut from, cuts here for obvious reasons. But back then, before then, people could do their Polanski. You said you saw that one movie you were talking about with what's her face?
With Brooke Shields?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
things like that would never, ever, ever happen now, and for good reason. So, yeah, there are reasons the times have changed, and they're not always bad. They're not always, how do they put it? The crybaby social justice warriors don't let us have any fun. Well, some things don't deserve to be given a platform.
No, absolutely. Well, it's like the some guy online said something about how he's not going to write a PC script. And I remember asking him, like, well, what do you mean PC? And he ended up deleting the whole thing with my response because we were just kind of going at it for like, oh, God, an hour or two. It was, I think, 75 comments in, just mainly me and him. And every single thing that he would throw at me was just, so you want to say the N-word? Well, yeah, I mean, it's not like it's racist. It's like, well, it's a little racist, man. Is it a black guy? Are you black? Well, no, it's a white guy saying it, and no, I'm not black. Like, well, you shouldn't say it.
Is he the villain?
Like, it should, like, huh?
Like, is he the villain?
No, he was saying, it's like, well, it's just a character arc because he starts off as racist, and then he, at the end, he starts seeing, like, that racism is a bad thing. I'm like,
that's
okay,
the definition of a PC movie.
Like, all right, so you're pretty much being politically correct then. Like, well, no, I'm not. Like, okay, well, still, I wouldn't recommend you use that. I mean, it's not like Gran Torino. I mean, you have to be mindful of how you write things. Like, it can be a career killer if you write something that is so incredibly outlandishly offensive, like unapologetically offensive. It can be done, but it's how you tackle it. I mean, as much shit as it gets, movie 43 is still a movie that cracks me the hell up, and it is an insanely offensive film. But
some of it, I mean, it's not a good movie by any means, but I think that was kind of the point.
No, it was just a really. I mean, you have a whole bunch of A-list celebrities that got together
and said
actually agreed to be in this film. Oh yeah, I mean, you have Hugh Jackman with a nice set of testicles on his neck. I mean, come on. But it's like you have all these films. Well, I shouldn't say films. All these script ideas. You have all these things that you're itching to write, and so I don't think that being politically correct is such a bad thing if it's within reason. Don't limit yourself creativity-wise, but just at the same time, if we were to focus on everything being politically correct, we wouldn't have things like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. We wouldn't have things like Trading Places, which obviously that one scene didn't work out, but it could work out if he showed up with like just dreadlocks and not even having the paint on his face. But then that's where I feel like woke culture would come in and be like, oh well, he's he's appropriating because he has dreadlocks. Like, I mean, just all these things that happen. The movie Kids from the 90s. Like, shit, man. Bunch of teenagers just running around having rampant sex with each other, drinking and getting into fights in New York City and everything. Like, I mean, just a lot of things. But, or even going down to like Clerks with the how many dicks did you suck, or the woman that had sex with the dead guy in the bathroom.
36? 36, is that including me?
37. Which that is the line that sold that movie to get into to go forward with production. that line is what launched Kevin Smith's career. but but yeah, so I mean, there's so many things that you can do creative. There's so many outlets that you can take. There's so many options that you have to write about. I'd say
I'm
there's
sorry.
no. Oh, go ahead.
I had to get this out there because you say 37, and my mind instantly goes to in a row.
Oh God. But it's just like there's so many things that you can write. There's so many topics at hand that could really set the bar for the next film. Whether it's yours or somebody else's, there's so many things that you can write.
Like literally
So,
anything. It's a blank
oh yeah,
canvas. It's a world for you to
exactly.
create.
And being PC, I wouldn't even look at it as being politically correct. I look at it as more of just understanding that times are not the same. Like if you grew up and you're absolutely in love with things like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which I still, I love that film. But like, when they go to hug each other in one part of the film, they push each other away after where they realize they're hugging. They call each other fat. Like, oh, okay, that wouldn't really fly today. So
69 dudes.
yeah, like I see that joke still works though. But it's just like there's a lot of stuff that you have to be careful with, and that what flew like 10 years ago doesn't fly today in a lot of mainstream filmmaking. So if you're going to write something offensive like LaQuisha, which I'm pretty sure probably killed that guy's career, produce it yourself, because I don't think anyone's going to take accountability for it. But that's really all I have on that subject. I mean, I really, that's the only reason why I didn't really come up with any other subjects for us to talk about tonight, because I fear that would probably take up the entire show. But is there anything you'd like to add to my philosophy, Joshua?
Well, since we're about 70 minutes in, I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything up in a nice little bow. When it comes to being PC, when it comes to being woke, especially if you're a writer, you can go two routes, especially if you're trying to make a living doing this thing called creativity. You mentioned the first option, which is produce it yourself. And then maybe you find a distributor, but that goes hand in hand with option number 2, selling it. And I think with both instances, you have to think about this. How financially viable is my writing? If you don't believe being PC or doing things in a certain way is your style, then you're probably going to have an even harder road to travel, because chances are the path to production is going to be a rough one, especially when it comes to getting funding. Now, I'm not saying you have to change what you write. I'm not trying to say you have to change your ideas. But if somebody sees something in something you write, and Brandon, you'll either correct me or give me a hallelujah, you sell your stuff, your hands will not be the last ones on it. They will make it what they need it to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you write an incredibly anti-PC script with, some sort of plot element or character that, a studio likes, and they buy it, they might just take the one or two things and toss out the rest. Because at that point, it's theirs now. But if you want to make it yourself, say you self-produce, self-fund, you do everything yourself, and you wind up with, I was going to say The Room, but that's probably not an example. Say you wind up with Clerks. You have the new Clerks, except it's incredibly non-PC, and it did everything you wanted it to be, and is, I don't know. I don't even know what a non-PC movie is these days, because Quentin Tarantino has made a career of, dropping the N-word 50 times in his movies, and nobody
each and every one.
Because
Man loves that word.
Because it's all about context.
Long
story short, you need to keep writing what you're writing, but being realistic about what you want to do with your writing. If you're trying to sell it to somebody, you're going to have to conform to someone's standards. Period. And they're going to change it. Because that's what they do. If you want to self-produce,
and
good luck. Because
and
you're
might I
going to have
add,
to get somebody to distribute it.
and might I add to your point, hire a reader, hire a professional reader. If you write a feature-length screenplay, I ask myself. Well, I can't really say I ask myself this because my mom. I feel so bad for her. She knows me. I would say, for those who do not share my warped sense of humor, when you write it, ask your mom or ask like a relative that really gets you to see if they can maybe read it and tell you what they think. My mom would really just be like, "Yep, this is pretty much how you talk, Brandon." Like, just yeah. But if not, if you can't get a friend or family member to read it, hire a professional reader and explain to them that this is something that you really want to put into a competition or something like that, or you want to try to do something with it, or use it as a calling card. And a lot of times they'll let you know, it's like, I wouldn't use this as a calling card. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can write that can pretty much make sure that will make sure that you never really find an audience, if that makes sense. So, I mean, always write what you want to write. Get your story out there. There's no such thing as a bad story. But there is a such thing as stories that don't line up with what's socially acceptable anymore. But should I get into the recommendation of the week?
Yeah. Hopefully it is not that story about three boys that are trying to commit the perfect date rape.
Oh.
I don't think that would fly.
No, it's got hell no. No,
So
there
what
is
is your recommendation of the week?
It is called Little Monsters. Actually, it did come out in theaters. It's not an independent film. It's on Hulu, but it is about an elementary school teacher who takes her kids out for a field trip. And long story short, there's a bunch of zombies that come out of the brush in Australia. And it's just absolutely hysterical. The whole thing is just funny as hell. She does her best to try to keep the students calm amidst the zombie apocalypse. So it's got Lupita Nyong'o. I think I said that right. Lupita Nyong'o, Josh Gad, Alexander England, Abe Forsyth. I mean, it's a good film. It's worth watching. It's on Hulu, I believe, and so that's mine. So.
Okay. And you know what? We're running a little late. I don't think we're going to be able to hit any cold reads this week, but
nope.
Tune in next week. No, we might not even be able to do it next week. We have a guest next week. Why don't you tell them about next week's guest?
Okay, well, next week's guest, I'd actually. His film was actually my very first recommendation that we've done on the show, I believe. It was for the movie Relish. The writer and director and producer and pretty much did a lot of stuff for the film to even bring it to fruition. Justin Ward. He will be on our show next week, and we'll be discussing just his beginnings and how he's gotten to do what he's doing now. Like, and everything he dealt with in his films, not just with Relish. As much as I could talk about Relish all night long, we're going to be talking about his other projects that he's worked on and things that he's gone through, and like how he's gotten through it, and that's pretty much it. So we'll be talking to him about his career and seeing what kind of insight he might have for aspiring writers and directors and producers. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got there. Looking forward to having him on there on next week. He's a really cool guy, so I'm excited for that.
We talked about his movie. Now we're going to be able to talk to the man himself. So that is next week, right here on the Wadcast, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, or no, Pacific. Stupid time zones.
There you go.
10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Right here on the Wadcast, which can be found at semicorestudios.com, thewadcast.com, or semicorepods.com. There's a lot of ways to listen to the show. If you don't listen live and you download the podcast, make sure you leave a review, leave a rating, let people know what you think about the Wadcast. That way we can move up and up in the ratings. More people will listen, and we'll be able to get, more and more people interested in coming to us to talk about their careers for you. That's kind of what we're aiming for here. We're trying to get the experience out there, the people that work, to tell you, not necessarily, hey everybody, this is how you get into the business, 6 easy steps. If you follow these steps, you're going to be guaranteed a position in Hollywood. No.
Yeah, I can make you famous.
If you just buy my book, you too will be famous.
And here's the other thing, too, guys. If you're listening to this and you go to our Facebook page, if there's any questions that you want answered, then by all means, message the Facebook page. Leave a comment on Twitter for us, or just leave a comment on our posts on the Wadcast on Instagram. Let us know what you think, and we'll do our best to address your questions on the next show, or if we have a special guest, we'll see if they can do it to where you get advice from an industry professional. So.
Okay, I guess that's all the time we have for the Wadcast this week. Thanks everybody for joining us right here for the live show. I already told you when and where to catch us again. I even told you what we're going to do. So the only thing left to do is say see you next week, and tagline here. Oh, I guess I forgot to write a tagline. Brandon, quick, a tagline.
My last tagline wasn't that great, and that was on the first episode. I kind of choose to refrain from doing that. So.
Okay, Heather, how about this?
Thank you for listening to the Wadcast, where we discuss writers, actors, directors, and everything in between. This has been Brandon, and who else has this been?
This has also been Josh.
Okay, and we bid you guys a fantastic night and an awesome weekend.
Yeah, what he said.
Tagline.